Hi. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a specific topic. This is meant mostly for worship leaders and creatives, but it really applies to absolutely anyone, and that is the topic of surrender and grace. I don't think we can fully become great in all we're meant to be without it. God has an incredible anointing for each one of us, for each one of you. But we can't carry the weight of that anointing on our own. It can only come through the grace of God. One thing that Brian Johnson said that I felt was a really important point was that if the message of freedom and creativity go deeper than the message of surrender, our freedom becomes sin, and our creativity is only limited to what we can do in our own strength. We need God's grace to go farther. And so my challenge is, will we be bold enough and willing to surrender enough to Him so that we can receive His grace? We can't fully receive His grace without going through fire and realizing what we've been delivered of, what we've been forgiven of. And I don't think we can fully receive that revelation of His grace without beholding Him and realizing what He's forgiven us of, what He's done for us. One thing Brian said was that a revelation of His grace is what changes us. We can't just say, I surrender my life. We have to do more. We have to behold the one who forgave us. And I think there's a story, or rather, I think Peter in the Bible is a great example of this. We know Peter was a pretty strong-headed, strong-willed, passionate person, and all throughout the Gospels, he really, I think, was focused, or rather, he was putting his strength, putting his confidence in his own abilities and his ability to hold to Jesus, rather than putting his confidence in the grace that Jesus has for us. Peter, as Jesus told him, was going to be the rock that he founded his church on. And ultimately that's what he became. But he didn't start there. Before Jesus' crucifixion, he told Jesus he would never deny him. And guess what happened? He denied him 3 times. He was focused on his own abilities to hold to Jesus rather than His grace. And we see in a story in John chapter 21, a few days later, after Jesus' resurrection, that Jesus basically commissioned him as the one to start the church, to build the church. It's in this passage. This is a Hebrew translation, so some of the names are in Hebrew. It might sound a little different. So Jesus, as they were speaking on the beach, said, Shimon, that's Simon, son of Yonah, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Master, you know that I love you. He said to him, Feed my lambs. And then he repeats it 2 more times. And this is where Peter went from being the person he was before the crucifixion to the builder of the church. And I think this only came through a revelation of God's grace, His never-ending, abundant grace. Because before that, Peter had failed Jesus in the worst way possible. He denied Him, which is basically like betrayal. But at this moment is when he realized that Jesus, or how much Jesus had forgiven him, and how vast His grace was. And it's after that he started building the church, and as we see in the Acts, all these miraculous things came out of him, like so many things that he had never even witnessed in his walk with Jesus, at least through his own self. But all these incredible things started happening with his ministry, and I think that's because he had finally surrendered all and started surrendering to the Lord. So that's my challenge for you. How much are you going to surrender and rely on his grace? How much are you willing to walk through fire, which reveals the Lord's grace to us and brings us to a place where we have no other thing to rely on than him?